So I think I finally have a proper grasp on bright lights. So I thought we'd have a little bit of fun and go through a top 10 new card interactions brought to us in bright lights. So funny enough, starting off at number 10, we don't actually touch any of the mechanologists. No. In fact, we're going to look at Shiyana. Yes, that's right. There's a new interaction for Shiyana brought to us courtesy of bright lights and the expansion slot. So the new card, Sonata Phantasmia, right? It's a Vizari specialization, meaning that it can be slotted into Shiyana, now gives her a better way to generate rune chant. And interestingly enough, what can you do with said rune chant? Well, if you combo it with Blazing Aether, you now have a decent ping. Somewhat, right? So say you get Sonata Phantasmia off, right? You generate a bunch of rune chants, you then pop the rune chant, you deal some arcane damage, you can double down on it with Blazing Aether. How successful will it be? Well, I don't know, but it seems fun. And you can even combo in things like Teklovossen through Spark of Genius to make sure that you can pump up the amount of resources you play into Sonata Phantasmia to hopefully get it to that 6 or greater. That way, it's a good way to sort of control, right? You combo that in with the Frost setup for Shiyana, so running Icelanders and Oldhymns cards, and you have a decent control backbone, which then you can then go into the Guardian cards like Starstruck and Crippling Crush, as well as now Sonata Phantasmia, into Blazing Aether to try and play somewhat of a big Shiyana. The next, at number 9, we have the mechs, right? So any of the Evo cards, you gotta put this on the list, right? Because it is a new interaction brought to us by bright lights, and it is a fun interaction. So you can now combo out your pieces, primarily though, Steel Soul into Sentry, into Steel Soul, into Sentry, into Steel Soul, into Sentry, right? So in Classic Construction, if you're crazy enough, you can run 3 of both, and you can just stack them back and back and back on top of one another to really make use of the block you gain, right? It can be a very defensive setup. You cycle through the gear, use it to block. Once block's depleted, you equip the next piece, and you go back and forth because they are both base equipment. Now, building off of the mechs, right? We need to talk about Teklovossen. So here's a crazy one that I've sort of started molding over, right? So we have Cash Out, yeah. So Cash Out on Teklovossen to cash in your Evos. I'm not quite sure the interaction on this, so you may destroy any number of weapons, equipment, and or non-token items you control. Now, just off a cursory glance, I would assume you destroy the top card, all the other cards under it are destroyed by destroying the top card, not as a result of Cash Out, meaning that you don't actually generate a huge amount of cash, right? But the simple fact that you can then re-equip equipment to go back into Cash Out or just to have equipment on board means that you might have somewhat of a setup here, right? So you cash out, maybe you've played the Evo Steel Soul, you can then go into Scrap Trader because they're now in your graveyard, you get them into your banish zone, you can then re-equip them with Teklovossen, as long as you find yourself a Fabricate. Now, it's not a hugely powerful combo, and it's pretty jank, really paying off of junking stuff through Scrap Trader. But in saying that, it is still a pretty decent draw engine, so I thought I'd include it here at number 8. Now, number 7, we have the first System Reset combo, and I'm going to tell you straight away, there's going to be a few System Reset, because to me, this card is absolutely busted, and I have no idea what they were thinking when they didn't make it double X. So System Reset, you pay X, you can then banish X amount of mechanologist items you control with a cost of 0 or 1, and then return them back to the arena under their owner's control. Meaning if you have a bunch of items with crank, you can use System Reset to refresh the crank. But there are also a few other ways to take advantage of System Reset. For instance, Prismatic Lens and Quantum Processor. Both of these have a once per turn effect. Well, it's a good thing you can reset them, right? So you can actually double dip. I've tried to look through the rulings. I can't see anywhere that doesn't say it, right? Under the same clause as the Evos, you're resetting the cards. So from that understanding, you banish, you replay them, you're able to then use their once per turn effects again. And both their once per turn effects are 0 cost. One being that you can look at the top card of your deck and then put a mechanologist item that matches its color from your banish zone on top of your deck to then maybe play as Dash, or Quantum Processor, where you may put a mechanologist item with a cost of 0/1 from your hand straight into the arena. So the fact that you can then ping that twice, right? You can potentially get 2 1-cost items straight away into the field without having to play them, without losing the action points, meaning that Quantum Processor might allow you to go +2 in action points depending on crank. Then at number 6, we have, of course, another System Reset combo. This time taking advantage of a few of those crank cards we mentioned. So again, using System Reset, you can reset your crank cards, then proc their crank effects to gain a bunch of action points. Now, One of the best ways to take advantage of this is, of course, in Dash with Symbiosis Shot. So Symbiosis Shot, whenever a mechanologist item enters the arena under your control, if it has fewer than 6 steam counters, you may put a steam counter on this, right? So you can stack up the steam counters, and then you can pay its action, remove a steam counter, and attack. This is not a once per turn effect, but it does lack go again. Meaning, though, if you use System Reset, you can potentially generate enough action points and enough steam counters to then shoot up to 6 times, meaning that you can, just through Symbiosis Shot and System Reset, if you have enough items on field, do 12 damage over the course of 6 hits. Now, if only it was any items, and that way you could play it in Shiyana, right, to then buff up with some of Dorinthia's cards to have a massive Symbiosis Shot. And one of the best ways to get this to work is to run cards like Dissolving Shield, Hadron Collider, and Mini Force Field, because these are the cards that I could find with the highest amount of steam counters, meaning that they can hang around on the field for the longest amount of turns while you build them up and then play System Reset into just blasting away. Next, at number 5, we have another use of those precious action points. We have, again, System Reset off of Dissolving Shield, Hadron Collider, or Mini Force Field because of the amount of steam counters they enter the arena with, into Grinding Gears. So Grinding Gears, action, 0 cost, target hero destroys the top card of their deck, right? So action, 0 cost, not once per turn, but doesn't have go again. So again, if you can generate the action points, you can loop this infinitely, meaning that there is potentially, right, a mill setup with Mechanologist. You play enough items, you play System Reset, you then use Grinding Gears to mill away at your opponent's deck. Although it may require some degree of setup, just off of a few items and Grinding Gears, right? Say you're pitching 1 blue, you can reset 3 items, meaning you get the 1 action point for System Reset, and then you can proc Grinding Gears twice, right? And that's off of 1 blue. So you have 2 blue, you now proc it 5 times. And 5 card destruction, maybe not so much in Classic Constructed, but in Blitz, might be quite impactful, and at the very least seems kind of fun to me. Now for number 4, we're going back to Symbiosis Shots, but we're tying in Magnetic Lockwave. So Magnetic Lockwave is a 3x. Target hero chooses X equipment they control, then you choose 1 from among them. That hero must defend your attacks this turn with that equipment if able. The key concept being, right, if you pitch 12 resources to pay for this card, then you're able to select all 4 of your opponent's equipment, meaning that they must block with one of those pieces, and you get to pick it, meaning that you can then use Symbiosis Shot, again off of System Reset and generating those action points, to whittle away at some of their gear and trigger its destruction effect if it is a piece of gear with one of those effects. Now, unfortunately, at XXX, right, I kind of dislike this, and I was quite tempted to put it on the next section, as I think this card would probably be a lot better suited if it was just 2x, and potentially reworded slightly differently to be something like target hero chooses X equipment they control, and then you choose half of X rounded down, and they must defend with those cards. Meaning that if you were to go for all 4 equipment pieces, you'd only have to play 8, but then you'd also get the benefit of being able to pick 2 of their equipment pieces. If you only went for 3, you'd have to play 6, but you only get to pick 1 of their equipment pieces. I think at 3 costs, it is a little bit slow, and pretty much all you can do, aside from 1 other attack, making it not so great, right? Because almost every deck has some level of gear where you're just using it for its effect, and generally speaking, it's a free block. There are quite a few equipment pieces with 0 block, no destruction effect, and then just a decent effect for you to run. It's definitely a late game card, but I still think it's somewhat of a cool interaction, again, coloring it with Symbiosis Shot and System Reset. For that reason, I didn't chuck it here on our dishonorable mentions. So, these cards, love the idea, but I think they're just shy, just a little bit overtuned, overbalanced to actually be functional. So starting off, we have Tick Tock Clock, right? It's a 0 cost item, put on the field. When you hit with an attack action, you're able to destroy this and up to 2 other items in the field to deal X damage. So to me personally, I don't know why they capped it, right? So you can destroy up to 3, including itself, meaning that you can do an extra 3 damage. Mind you, Boom Grenade, even blue, is already 2 damage. I think it would have been an awesome effect if it wasn't capped. You can destroy as many items and gives you a reason to try and go for a huge item setup to sort of do an OTK similar to Runeblade with their Runechant tokens. A lot of the items already have decent timers on them, right? So they can't hang around forever, so you're not just endlessly stacking gear. The only hero this would be a absolute monster in would have to be Dartadol. Other than that, I think it's way too overbalanced to actually see decent amount of play. Again, being limited at 2 other items as well as TikTok Clock. Then after that, we have Hyper Scrapper, which is sort of the similar reason. I would have kind of liked to see 2 versions of this card. So as an additional cost to play this, banish X items from your graveyard. When this attacks, it gets X. Plus, if 3 or more hyperdrivers were banished, then you gain 6 resources and it has go again. So the main idea is you want to pair it with hyperdrivers, which by itself is not a horrible thing, right? But it does then make it dependent on getting those hyperdrivers into your graveyard, not your banish zone, say through boosting, and then also paying 1 resource per X of damage. I think it would have been a little bit better if it was banished twice X items from your graveyard, right? Giving you a good payoff, similar to TikTok Clock, if you were able to select a lot more items. So for TikTok Clock, if you could get more items on the board to fuel it, I think that'd be greater, right? And then Hyper Scrapper, if you could select more items in your graveyard to really amp up the damage and make it a nice solid finisher with that bonus if you have the hyperdrivers. Or split it into 2 cards, one that, like this, makes use of hyperdrivers and is not so much a huge attack or a huge combo finisher, but more just a way to generate resources and then have a big scrap finisher where you're really looking to destroy a ton of items to do a ton of damage. Then, speaking of hyperdrivers, we have Moonshot. So, double X cost. Play this only if you've boosted this turn. As an additional cost to play this, you must destroy X hyperdrivers you control. When this attacks, it gets +3 for each hyperdriver destroyed this way. If it has 10 or more, it gets overpower. So, at minimum to trigger its strongest effect, you must pay 6 and then destroy 3 hyperdrivers you control. Now, obviously, Moonshot into Hyper Scrapper would be great, right? You destroy them, put them in your graveyard, and then Hyper Scrapper to gain those resources, go again. But it's kind of backwards, right? Because you want to play Hyper Scrapper first into Moonshot. So I think Moonshot being double X is a little bit of a disservice to it and what it's going for. I can understand the paying 6 for 12 damage and overpower, right? That is great. But then also the concept that you need those hyperdrivers on field, right? So again, it's most viable in Max, but even in Max, getting 3 hyperdrivers to constantly stay around to then play into Moonshot, well, that is a big build up for not as much payoff as what I would necessarily like to see. It's definitely not a bad card. Just personally to me, I would like to see things kind of seep through the cracks now and then, right? So we can see some fun and broken effects. But like usual, LSS has done a wonderful job balancing things around the competitive scene. So I can't fault them for that. I just love the idea of going crazy and having these big payoffs. Speaking of big payoff, we have Singularity. Yeah, unfortunate, right? Singularity had some workable ways. As it is currently, I think it's way too slow and way too weak to actually get the job done. So Singularity, you must transform your hero, your weapon, and 4 Evos you have equipped. 4 unique Evos. So each slot has to be an Evo for you to then bring out Teklovossen and be able to swing with this monster of a unit, right? So you can pay 3, get to banish 2 cards under him. So generally speaking, you'll have anywhere from 6 onwards, meaning that you can proc this up to 3 times. Does not have go again. It has a hefty cost of 3 resources, but then you also have its secondary ability, where if it attacks a hero, they must discard a card, right? So not if it hits, but if you actually attack a hero, so you pay 3, they discard a card, and then you're able to do up to 6 damage 3 times. With a system reset combo for the action points, right, you could swing through and try to do this as a finisher, but again, getting it on board is the big dilemma. You then also have the issues where your intellect is now 3, and the fact that it is an equipment, meaning that there are a few ways to mess around with it and some other cards and some other interactions that altogether make Teklovossen, the Necropotent, a significantly, to me, weaker version of our number 3, Nitro Mechanoid, right? So Nitro Mechanoid has gotten a substantial boost through Bright Lights because you can now stick a bunch of cards under it. So Nitro Mechanoid is transform target mechanologist head, chest, and arms and legs, weapon, and 3 hyperdrives you control into it, right? So they don't all have to be Evos, meaning that you can use your starting gear, but more importantly, if you do use Evos, you can stick a bunch more cards under Nitro. Now, the benefit to it, it's a weapon, it's not your hero, meaning that if it gets destroyed, you don't instantly lose. It still has an attack, right? But its attack is 0 cost, banish a card, meaning the more cards you stick under it, the more you can swing. It has overpower and of course temper. Temper you don't really care about because again, it's your weapon, it's not your hero. So the simple fact that you can now pile a bunch of Evos under this card and then go into the system reset combo to generate action points and then just swing with Nitro Mechanoid is huge and makes it a significantly better version to me than our Necropotent Lord. Bit unfortunate, but right, the fact that it can probably see a lot more competitive success is great. Then at number 2, right, we talked about system reset, but we also have to tie in Maxx. So Maxx and his inbuilt hyperdriver generation just makes Nitro Mechanoid significantly better. So again, you can equip up those Evos, you can put more cards under Nitro, you can have an easier time playing it because you're able to generate some of the hyperdrivers through Maxx rather than just having to find all the pieces. And then of course you've got system reset into action points, into just smashing in people's faces with Nitro Mechanoid. Again, you're most likely going to start off with 8 cards under Nitro, and if you're able to get off a decent system reset with some items on board, most likely played before Nitro, to take advantage of your hyperdrivers, you can then just wail at your opponent until you win. It is by far a significantly better OTK than Singularity. That is also going to be a lot more easier to pull off with Maxx, because you don't have that Evo requirement, and it's actually the one setup that I'm probably interested a little in playing because it borders onto the goofy combos that I do enjoy, right? Going for a massive Nitro system reset and just pound away at your opponent seems quite fun to me. Right, then, lucky last, number 1, we have Dardadol. Yeah, so I couldn't do this without giving it to Dardadol, right? So whenever you boost a item with Crank, you can play it. You can put it straight into the arena, and you can proc Crank, right? Because Crank is, as it enters the arena, you may remove a Steam counter, not when you play it, right? So you put it into the arena off of Dardadol's effect, and you gain an action point. So every now and then, right, you're just boosting away, you can go again for your normal attacks, and all of a sudden you can do more crazy things because you get free action points, right? And then once again, system reset for Dardadol, and the fact that you can get, a huge number of items into play, right? Either Dardadol or Maxx are definitely my go-to for now Nitro. And I can definitely see it have huge success in Blitz. And the fact that you have more life and more turns to set it off in competitive, right? I definitely think that Nitro is gonna really rise to the tops, right? And is what Singularity kind of should have been. But yeah, Dardadol by far has to be the strongest hero being benefited off of Bright Lights outside of obviously the 3 heroes in it. Again, the simple fact that not only do you have access to more items for Dardadol's effect, but now that you can crank them as they enter the arena to give your ability a basic, just, most of the time generate an action point for free is huge to me. And in terms of the card interaction, it's basically just boost an item, put the item into the arena, crank it. And I think through that combo, you can literally just lay waste to your opponent with Dardadol. And that's why Dardadol is, for me, the number 1 best card interaction being brought forth in Bright Lights. Anyway, that's my list, right? My top 10 favorite or new interactions, right, that I can think of from Bright Lights. If I've missed anything cool, be sure to let me know. If you like the combos, let me know which one you like, which one you're going to try out, which one you're going to play. I think after I'm done, bored with Malady and Shiyana, I'll probably give maybe Dardadol Nitro or Maxx Nitro a go. I think Maxx Nitro as my classic constructed deck would probably be my go-to classic constructed deck, I should say. It just seems so cool being able to just, again, wail on your opponent a ton more because of how many cards you can potentially put under Nitro through Evos. But overall, the top card for me from Bright Lights has to be System Reset. This card opens up so many possibilities for Mech, is a great way to refresh your items, prolong your hyperdrivers, and just generate action points. And alright, it shouldn't be 1x. That's as simple as you can be. It should be double X. You pay 1, you cover system resets action point. You pay 2, you go positive in action points and you reset your items. You pay 3, and well, you just do whatever you want on your turn basically.